Strength, the best build type for PvP in Elden Ring. But it isn't just about their absolutely disgusting amount of damage, their thick, meaty weapons that makes your wife want to leave you, or the art of being such a brainlet that you steamroll through a gank of 3 people with sheer willpower. And don't get me wrong, that's certainly part of it, but over 69% of strength users fail to ever get the maximum potential out of their build, and instead adopt a one-dimensional playstyle that makes them seem like nothing more than a single-celled organism. But the truth is, strength builds are actually the most versatile and dynamic build types available, with access to a vast array of weapons and the ability to reach higher defenses than any other build. This makes strength builds the best option for PvP content, where you can further optimize it to be specifically for 1v1 fights in the arena, or make it extremely adaptable for the chaotic mess that is invasions.
Bye, have a great time!
So in this video, I'm going to help you break the stigma and show the world that even someone like you can make a decent build. Hi, my name is Rust. I'm a Soulsborne content creator with an emphasis on PvP. And a fair warning, this won't be your typical build video where I slap you with a stat spread, give you a singular weapon that you're soulbound to use for all eternity, and send you on your way to get obliterated. Instead, I'll be teaching you how to get the most out of your stat spread, including various diminishing returns, and soft caps on your health, defenses, and damage, teach you how to optimize your talismans and armor for various situations, and give you the tools and knowledge that you need to tweak and modify this build until you inevitably ruin it with your poor life choices. And with that, be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know if this information was helpful to you at all, or if you're just more confused than ever. This build will be optimized around rune level 150, which after Elden Ring's DLC release has become the common invasion and dueling bracket on both PC and PlayStation. This build works with either the Hero or Vagabond starter class, though I highly recommend the Vagabond option as it'll offer you easier access to a valuable tool that I'll discuss later on down the line. When making a build, the very first stat that we need to talk about is Vigor. Now, we've all heard the meme, level Vigor, and you might argue that a better player doesn't need to level Vigor, just don't get hit, idiot. And, well, sure, it's possible to win in PvP with base Vigor. Just remember, all that extra damage doesn't matter if you're dead. But it isn't Vigor by itself that's so important. Instead, it's how the rest of your build adds to the value of each point of Vigor through various talismans, consumables, and defenses given by your armor. So let's talk about how to optimize it. Like every other stat, Vigor has an arc of diminishing returns, where at higher levels of investment, the stat starts to see fewer and fewer returns. You see your first soft cap of Vigor at 40, where the curve turns from being exponential to being linear, and it stays linear progression up until 60 Vigor, where it quickly tapers off to a firm soft cap. From 60 Vigor, you can squeeze out an extra 200 HP of base health by going up to 99 Vigor, but these points are better used elsewhere. You have 2 HP boosting talismans, being the Crimson Amber Medallion and the Erdtree Favor, each of which gives you a multiplicative boost to your overall HP, meaning that they stack with one another. And having both talismans will add a greater sum of overall health than you would have with one without the other. And while this really only applies if you're hosting or if you're invading on Seamless, you can throw on Morgoth's Great Rune on top of that and skyrocket your health all the way up to 2,717 HP, being 800 more than you originally started with. So if you're ever wondering why people hate Rune-Arced Bonfire Duelists so much, well, it probably has a little something to do with the extra 30% health that they have over you. But it doesn't just stop there. Your stat spread will directly contribute to both your defenses as well as your resistances. For the sake of clarity, there's technically 2 values here, being your defense and damage negation. Defense is a flat value which increases with levels of investment into each of your stats. At baseline, you start out with roughly 75 defenses of each damage type and 90 resistances per affliction. Each of your stats give a flat increase to every one of your defenses and resistances, where generally they increase your defenses by about 20 points per 50 levels and resistances by 10 points per 50 levels. But most stats have an affinity with certain defenses and resistances that gives them a bonus. Vigor grants an extra 50 fire defense and an extra 40 immunity. Mind will grant an extra 40 focus, Endurance will grant an extra 40 robustness, Strength adds an extra 27 points into all of your physical defenses, Intelligence adds an extra 40 magic defense, and Arcane grants an extra 40 holy defense. Whereas Dex and Faith just provide the base increases in defenses and resistances across the board. Some important breakpoints for resistances that you'll want to keep in mind are 381 Robustness, which lets you tank a Frostpot, 301 Immunity to resist a Rot Pot, and 311 Focus to prevent falling asleep from a Lulling Branch. Damage Negations, on the other hand, is tied to your armor, and decreases damage by a percentage after factoring in defenses. Damage negations scale very well up into about 30%, where they hit a bit of a soft cap, and start getting less returns on investment. But the trend stays pretty linear at this point, meaning that you should at least aim for 30% damage negation, and get even more if you can. Where this starts to get costly is in your negations per point of equip load. However, your endurance stat doesn't really see any diminishing returns up until about 60 endurance. After reaching a minimum of 30% damage negation from your armor, stacking on some crab and drinking a physic with Opaline hard tier, your effective negations after calculating for PvP modifiers is about 40%. Factor in your HP boosting talismans and consumables and the 1900 health that you got from base 60 vigor, it turns into a little over 4000 effective HP. And if you haven't had it said to you before, then let me be the first. Level your fucking vigor. Cool, so now that's out of the way, let's talk about damage. Since we're building a strength build, all of our weapons will be using the heavy infusion. This makes any infusible weapon scale purely on strength, making each level that we invest let us deal more damage. Strength gets a unique bonus where if you're two-handing a weapon, you get an additional 1.5 modifier to your strength stat, making it incredibly easy to hit your first soft caps on damage at really low levels. But to be clear, your character has to be physically holding a single weapon in both hands for this to apply. Two-handing paired weapons like Starfist or Backhand Blades does not apply the two-handed strength bonus. The soft caps on strength while one-handing a weapon are at 80 strength, whereas if you're two-handing a weapon, then your soft caps are at 54 strength. With a two-handed strength bonus, one might assume that at 66 strength, you reach a hard cap on your damage when two-handing a weapon, as it would boost you to an artificial 99 strength. But this actually isn't true. After you reach 54 strength, you will continue to increase your damage on two-handed setups by the same amount for every point that you invest with no further diminishing returns. Between 54 and 80 strength, you will roughly gain 7% increase on your damage on two-handed setups, and 14% more damage on any non-two-handed setups. So really, whether you push for 54 or 80 strength, really depends on the types of setups that you plan to use, and how many points you have available to invest. When you're crafting a build, the basic rule of thumb is to get to 60 vigor, have enough endurance to reach a medium equip load with your heaviest armor, weapons, and talismans, and then meet the minimum requirements for your various weapons, and then dump everything else into your main damage stat. So, let's go over some of the various weapon options that work best on a pure strength build that don't require high investment into other stats. One of the best weapons for a strength build also happens to suffer a bit of an identity crisis, being a colossal sword called a Great Sword. And in an effort to make this a little less confusing, the community has made a few different nicknames for this weapon, including Gugs, Guts Great Sword, Buster Sword, Really Big Toothpick, Big Hard Metal Meat Stick.
I want to see a big, thick, hard, just harder than rock, able to absorb two full-grown men.
Ask your mom about it later. It's one of the largest colossal swords in the game with the highest damage, reaching 826 AR when two-handed on a 54 strength build, or 884 AR on an 80 strength build. This is likely your heaviest weapon that we'll be using on this build, and the highest damaging. The main feature of this weapon is the rolling R1, which does pierce damage. This is an important note because when an opposing player is actively in an attack animation, pierce resistance is reduced by 15%, letting you hit them for a massive increase in damage. It works really well when combined in combination with Spear Talisman, Retaliatory Cross Tree, and Two-Handed Sword Talisman for an extra boost of about 37% extra damage on counter hits from a crouch attack. For Ashes of War, either Chilling Mist or Poison Mist do fairly well with this, providing an extra bit of status pressure. Gugs also works great as a swap for Waves of Darkness, either to peel off pressure so that you can have space to heal, or if you just want to do some big dick damage, and potentially take out an entire team in one go. The waves themselves scale with intelligence, but the weapon part of the Ash of War scales purely with strength. So if you can hit them with the first part of the Ash and then roll catch with follow-up, then you're doing something around like 1600 damage with one move. The only downside of Gugs is that it's very slow and very reactable, and even if you're a movement god with perfect blending, a guy holding up a shield can be the bane of your existence. So running Kick as an Ash of War actually works quite well. Sword Lance is all the rage in the competitive scene right now, quite literally, making people rage quit from the game because of how absurdly overtuned this shit is. Sword Lance seems to have something wrong with his damage scaling, as the AR on this thing comes out to even higher than what you can get with his Y-hander, with 760 AR on a 54 strength build, and up to 817 when you push up to 80 strength. The bread and butter with this is that you land an R2 to R1 true combo for a huge amount of damage with hyper armor on the R2. For Ashes of War, Blink Bolt tends to be a popular pick, as it gives you a nice gap close which you can go straight into an R2 out of it, and can often force a trade if the opponent tries to punish you as you come zooming in. But even weapons that you might assume are more oriented for a dex build, like curved swords or thrusting swords, actually work best on an optimized strength build. Shamshir being one of the best curved swords in the game with the best moveset, and Clean Route Knight Sword being the best thrusting sword, both work exceptionally well on a strength build, where a Clean Route Knight Sword on an 80 dex build will get 501 AR, and will instead get 556 AR on an 80 strength build. What makes the Shamshir such a good weapon is that as long as your first hit stuns the opponent, then it's always safe to go for the second swing. This is a unique feature of the Shamshir that isn't shared by most of other weapons. And the Clean Route Knight Sword is one of the best weapons in the game with its overall great moveset, high damage, and low recovery. These weapons don't have to rely on fancy Ashes of War in order to make them worth using. Just their base moveset alone is more than enough to get the job done. The Chicken Leg and Stone Club are the best options for a bit of Unga Bunga on a strength build. Stone Club providing a high amount of hyper armor that can even rival that of larger weapons like greatswords and halberds. And if someone doesn't give it the respect that it deserves, then they'll get a beating that gives them flashbacks back to childhood. Slap Barbaric Roar on it, throw on the Charge Attack Talisman and the Roar Talisman, and Highland Axe on your offhand, and you'll get an R2 with enough hyper armor that you can bully a Colossal Sword and do enough damage to send someone back to the loading screen. And of course the Chicken Leg. This comes with a bit of extra holy damage on it, and can be bundled with Holy Grease to do a disgusting amount of damage. Normally, you want to avoid using weapons that have split damage on them, as a bit of the split damage gets negated by the player's base defenses. But when you're able to buff a weapon on top of it, having split damage actually starts to see better returns on damage than you would have with straight physical scaling. So in this case, it ends up being more optimal. And in terms of one-handed or power stance options, Halberd Offhand Hand Axe really never can go wrong. Commander Standard used to be the best install option since it had better range and damage, but with the additions of Super Grease from the DLC, a heavy infused Banished Knight's Halberd will always outperform. Halberds are great tools for managing multiple people, and they're the best tool when learning setup parries. Starfists are one of the most disgusting marvels to ever grace this godforsaken game, and even without the 2-handed strength bonus, they do enough damage on an R2 to end your entire bloodline. This shit hard carries in PvE, and doesn't let up any pressure when brought into PvP. Throw on Endure and some Blood Grease, and clap people so hard that you leave them permanently disfigured. The only thing that strength builds really lack in is our access to projectile-based Ashes of War, where things like Thunderbolt and Stormblade mostly scale their damage on dexterity. With these ashes, it doesn't matter what infusion that you give the weapon, since the projectile itself has separate scaling from the weapon. The Greatsword of Solitude provides a decent ranged ash for a strength build, though being rather unreliable to its poor tracking. But in addition with Egon's Harpoon, you now have up to 5 projectiles that scale really well on strength. The trick with a harpoon is that you can only reliably hit it at close range, or if there are ways out. Otherwise, you have to unlock and free aim to get it to land. All these weapons can be accessed without having to invest any extra points into other stats, but for the cost of an extra 2 or 3 points of dexterity, you can get several extremely useful tools to help you enhance your build. At 16 dexterity, you get access to Egon's Great Bow, which is an invaluable tool for breaking stalemates and chipping down passive ganks, as well as some other great weapons for strength builds like Mesmer's Soldier Spear and the Great Epee. But one of the most valuable tools that you could ask for at 14 dexterity is the Grafted Blade, which provides you with not only a 5-second endure to prevent you from being knocked off of precarious heights, but also gives you an extra 5 extra bonus stats in all of your different stats for 60 seconds. Now I briefly mentioned at the start of the video that Vagabond is the best class for a strength build, and here's why. With only 1 point of investment into intelligence, after buffing with Grafted Blade, then you get access to Star Scourge Greatswords. And I swear to God in my fucking life, this is the best tool for invasions out of literally anything else. You would think that after 3 years of this game being out that people would learn how to roll that Ash of War. No, they didn't. Bye. Yes! 4 for 4! What makes Star Scourge so good is that you can launch people in whichever direction that you want them to go. Unlike other gravity options like Alabaster Lord Sword or Onyx Curved Greatswords, When you do the pull animation, the player will be launched in whichever direction that your back is facing, and the further they are away from you, the harder they get yeeted. Buffing with Grafted Blade also gives you enough bonus stats to get access to a number of useful spells, such as Bestial Vitality for extra regen, and Knight's Maiden's Mist to smoke out gankers if they're hiding in tiny rooms waiting to ambush you. Now, you don't have to use all the same weapons that I do. These are just some various tools that you get access to that you can use to adapt to whatever situation that comes your way, or just give you a way to mix things up and keep it interesting. The important thing is that you come out with 2 takeaways. A, the equip load of your heaviest potential setup, and B, how many extra stats you're investing into outside of strength. The points that you'll have remaining will determine the balance that you end up having between strength and endurance. But before we can talk about that, we need to go over a Talisman loadout, as it will directly impact how you run your final build. Talisman loadouts will differ highly dependent on whether you're playing in the arena or invasions. If you're a duelist, then the first 3 talismans that you should always have are the Crimson Armor Medallion, Erdtree Favor, and Ritual Shield Talisman. These 3 synergize really well with each other, where the Ritual Shield will reduce the damage from the first hit you take by 30%. After you eat the hit, you can swap off of your HP boosting talismans, reducing your max HP, and bringing you back up to full health, re-enabling the Ritual Shield. From there, you can swap off the Ritual Shield to a full set of talismans focused around increasing your damage output or reducing damage taken. If you're using a multi-hit setup like Twin Blade or Shamshir, then having a lineup of Godskin Swaddling Cloth, Rotten Wing, and Milson's Prosthesis can help you both recover a good amount of HP on multi-hits and stack the shit out of your damage. But if you're using a slower or a thrust-oriented damage setup like Great Spears or Colossus Swords, then you can run the combination of Spear Talisman, Retaliatory Cross Tree, and Two-Handed Sword Talisman. Then on your third row, you'll want the combination of Blessed Dew and Red and Blue Feather Talismans to increase your effective health, all of this once again synergizing greatly with your solid Vigor pool, increasing your overall effective HP. For invaders, you certainly can run a Duelist Talisman loadout, but it's a lot less practical to do a bunch of talisman swapping when you're busy dodging literal missiles from a group of 3 people. Instead, it's best to run your talismans with respect to what setup you're using, and have easily accessible swaps for different forms of utility. For invaders, Crimson Armor Medallion is still your best in slot for the first talisman, since the 10% increase to your max HP will scale with your armor, defense best from Crab, and will even increase the amount of healing that you get from Meat Dumplings. Your next 2 slots will be setup dependent. If you have less than 88 poise from your armor, then Bulgod's Talisman is pretty much a must in invasions, and your other talisman can be focused around what setup you're using, such as if you're running a 2-handed setup, then Two-Handed Sword Talisman will be your best in slot. The next row down should further serve to boost your damage on your current setup. If I'm using something like an Uggs, then I'll want access to Spear and Retaliatory Cross Tree so I can maximize the damage out of my Colossus Sword. But as you may notice, in both templates, I avoid going over the 4th talisman slot. That's because this will determine how your final build is put together. For your 4th talisman, you'll want to reserve it for either a equip load boosting talisman or yet another damage boosting talisman. The 2 equip load boosting talismans that you have access to are Greatjar's Arsenal and Erdtree Favor +2. Greatjar increases your equip load by 19%, and Erdtree only increases it by 8%. And at this point, we can talk about how to run your armor, and put this build all together. I covered how to optimize your armor in good detail in my previous video. I highly recommend that you check this out if you haven't already, as it'll provide a lot of insight that I won't cover in as much depth in this video. One of the most important factors that you'll base your build around is how much poise you want. The 3 most important breakpoints being at 88 poise, 111, and 117 poise. 88 poise with Bulgod's Talisman allows you to meet some of the most important poise breakpoints, such as tanking the second swing of all 1- and 2-handed fast weapons, including thrusting swords, curved swords, and katanas. This is the absolute minimum that I would ever recommend, and whether you choose to use any of the options for your faction that I suggest in this video or not, then I implore you to at least shoot for this breakpoint. As a suggestion, a good setup to run this with would be the Circlet of Light, Altered Beast Champion Armor, Young Lion's Gauntlets, and Crucible Greaves. This armor setup provides you the highest possible defense-weight ratio, letting you reach 31% defenses at only 32 equip load. The Circuit of Light allows you to drop the extra point that you would invest into Intelligence for access to Star Scourge, and instead put it into Endurance. You can then set your 4th talisman as Erdtree Favor, and still be able to mid-roll while using Uggs with Offhand Hand Axe and Soft Swap Misery Cord, with all of your heaviest talismans. This build finalizes at 60 Vigor, 38 Endurance, 80 Strength, 16 Dexterity, and 9 Intelligence at 88 Poise with Bulgod's Talisman. The next breakpoint that I would recommend, and the one that I would recommend the most, is at 111 Poise with Bulgod's Talisman. At this amount of poise, you meet the majority of all the most important breakpoints, including things like being able to tank the first swing of all one-handed fast weapons, the backswing of 2-handed light greatswords, and 2 hits from an offhand dagger. Now you can reach the 80 strength soft cap at 111 poise if you run Bird Helm with Tree Sentinel armor, Lionel's gauntlets, and Solitude legs. The Bird Helm provides you with an extra 7 levels, with 3 in strength and 4 in dexterity, letting you drop the extra points of investment in these stats to add to your endurance. Equip the Great Jar's Arsenal as your 4th Talisman slot, and you're good to go with 60 vigor, 43 endurance, 77 strength, 13 dexterity, and 10 intelligence. But there's a problem with this setup. The Bird Helm, while it provides a huge boost to your stats, has the downside of 10% reduced healing from flasks, and it fails to meet the important resistance breakpoints in robustness and focus resist. The robustness resistance can be fixed quite easily by dropping a single point out of strength and putting it into endurance. Then you can reach a high enough equip load that you can swap out your legs to verdigris, bringing your robustness up to 401 and raising your defenses all the way up to 34.5% slash and 33% pierce. So while you're not hitting that pretty perfectly round number of 80 strength, you're getting a lot more value out of that single point of endurance than you could ever get out of the 1 to 3 AR that you're getting from that single point in strength. This runs out the build at 60 vigor, 44 endurance, 76 strength, 13 dexterity, and 10 intelligence. Then, anytime that you need to heal from a flask, you can easily swap out the Crimson Tier headpiece and Blooming armor to boost your healing from flasks, and swap back to your regular armor once you've finished healing. At this point, the build is totally functional, and if you want to run it as is, then it'll do just fine. But there's 2 alternatives that I have to recommend. The Bird Helm, while being incredibly valuable for the insane stat buffs that it provides, comes at the cost of focus resist and fairly low defenses. So, as an alternative, you could run the armor with Imp Lion Head, Veteran's Armor, Veteran's Gauntlets, and Lionel's Greaves. While you lose the stat buffs from the Divine Bird Helm, the Imp Lion provides an extra 2 bonus points into Vigor, which you can sub out for extra endurance. With this setup, you can still reach 58 Vigor, 44 Endurance, 75 Strength, 16 Dexterity, and 10 Intelligence. But this raises your defenses to 35.9% slash resist and 35% pierce resist. But even at this point, you're 49 points shy of reaching your focus resistance breakpoint of 311. The Spiral Horn Shield is a shield that you can have equipped and put on your back for an extra boost of 50 resistance in robustness, immunity, and focus. So slap this thing on, and you'll have just enough focus to resist falling asleep after using a lulling branch. As a note, you don't have to be actually using the shield. As long as it's on your back, it'll provide you the passive buff. Overall, you're sacrificing just 5 points in strength, which is roughly around 1% of your overall damage, and vastly improving your survivability, while still being able to make use of a heavy loadout like Gugs with offhand hand axe. Out of all the various ways that you can optimize a strength build at 111 poise, this is the one that I would recommend the most. And lastly, at 117 poise, not only do you meet the majority of possible breakpoints, including everything up to 111 breakpoint, as well as the ability to tank the second swing of one-handed great weapons, but you can also reach the 88 poise breakpoint without Bullgoat's Talisman, meaning that you can run your build without it for the most part, and then simply swap it on in situations where you need the extra poise. For this, you could opt for the extremely well optimized Imp Lion Head, Gaius' Armor, Lionel's Gauntlets, and Verdigris Greaves. This puts you at 58 Vigor, with 48 Endurance, 71 Strength, 16 Dexterity, and 10 Intelligence, without the need for Bullgoat's Talisman. The trade-off here is that you're losing around 2% damage from dropping down to 71 strength from 80, and in turn you gain the ability to run a talisman loadout like Retaliatory Crosstree, Spear Talisman, Two-Handed Talisman, and the Great Jar's Arsenal, with the freedom to flex on Bullgoat's Talisman if you really need the extra poise. You also reach some of the highest defense possible at 37% slash resist and 36.3% pierce resist, and still manage to meet your breakpoints of robustness and immunity, and meet your focus breakpoint as long as you have Spiral Horn equipped. The only downside here is that this version of the build will do roughly 5% less damage with non-two-handed setups like Halberd Off-Axe or Starfists. But it's really up to you and your personal preference which direction that you decide to take this build. They're all optimal, just optimal for different preferences. Whether you're dead set on hitting that damage soft cap at all costs, or if you're comfortable enough with talisman swaps that you can run the heavier 117 poise setup and adapt your loadout as necessary. But more than anything, what I hope to do with this video is provide you with the guidelines for you to work off of, teach you the most important breakpoints, soft caps, and tips for optimization to help you craft your own builds without having to look through 50 different Bloodhound Fang guides on YouTube and wonder which one doesn't suck complete ass. In the description of this video, I have links to all of these builds using Amelia's build planner, as well as various charts on diminishing returns and effective HP/damage scaling. And as a reminder, the effective HP calcs are rough. It's just a bit of theoretical number crunching to help you provide a bit of context on how things work in practice. But that's going to do it for this video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.